What if the most well-known facts about medieval castles, which we're used to seeing in movies, hide a completely different, much harsher reality?
We've come to view these structures as symbols of power and security, but behind their majestic stone facades lay a daily routine fraught with invisible dangers.
What seems ordinary to us today turned into a true test of endurance within the citadel's walls. A deep study of the engineering solutions of that era reveals surprising and sometimes shocking details of the daily lives of the fortress's ordinary inhabitants. From treacherous spiral staircases designed to kill to primitive sewage systems that turned luxurious chambers into breeding grounds for infection. Every element of the castle had its dark side.
Life inside a stone fortress demanded not only courage, but also incredible physical endurance.
Why, then, did even the wealthiest lords sometimes feel like hostages in their own homes? Watch the video to the end, and you'll understand how ordinary architecture challenged people every day and what price they had to pay for the right to live under the protection of granite walls. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in the actual design of these massive hearths. The castle kitchen was a spacious room with fires burning constantly. Huge stone ovens operated continuously to provide hot meals for the dozens of inhabitants of the fortress. Red-hot coals shot sparks onto the stone floor, covered with a layer of dry straw. This proximity of fire and combustible materials created a constant threat of the entire room catching fire. The fire was kept going by thick logs that constantly needed to be turned with heavy iron tongs.
Servants moved ceaselessly between the blazing hearths, carrying massive cauldrons of boiling water.
A single careless movement near the red-hot stove could cause one to lose their balance. The stone floor slabs were often covered with a layer of spilled fat, making them incredibly slippery. Workers had to perform miracles of dexterity, balancing amidst the raging flames. Cooking required the use of heavy iron utensils of incredible size. Huge spits with carcasses strung on them had to be rotated by hand in close proximity to the red-hot coals. The heat from the red-hot metal forced workers to regularly retreat to cooler corridors. The handles of the tools heated up to critical temperatures, making it impossible to touch them without thick gloves. Working in such conditions was a true test of physical endurance. Water for the kitchen was delivered in massive wooden barrels from internal wells. Spilled liquid mixed with ash, turning the stone floor into sticky mud. One had to move across such a surface with small, careful steps. A heavy pot of hot soup falling could spell disaster for the entire shift. Every minute spent in this room demanded the utmost attention to the surroundings. Architects tried to place kitchen units in separate annexes for safety's sake. However, in bad weather, delivering prepared food to the main hall became a difficult task. Long walks across open courtyards forced the servants to hurry, increasing the risk of falling. Massive trays blocked their view, making every step on the slippery stones unpredictable. The process of feeding the castle's inhabitants resembled a complex logistical operation.
The kitchen's interior was devoid of any decorative elements due to the constant soot.
Thick stone walls absorbed odors and heat, remaining warm even late at night. Lighting was provided exclusively by the glow of burning logs in the massive fireplaces. The corners of the room were shrouded in thick shadow, concealing discarded tools and firewood. Moving through the dim light among the scorching objects required a perfect knowledge of the layout. The daily routine of the kitchen staff was a constant battle against the heat and heavy loads. Their labor remained invisible to the guests feasting in the fortress's grand halls. However, it was precisely this work, hidden from prying eyes, that kept the entire massive stone mechanism running. It's very interesting to learn about different perspectives on the workings of life in the old days. Be sure to leave comments below the video and subscribe to this channel. What lies behind the beautiful picture will forever change our understanding of history. For a long time, architects did not know how to build effective chimneys for huge rooms. Smoke from burning logs rose to the high ceiling and gathered there in a thick cloud. The lack of proper draft caused the acrid fog to slowly descend, filling the entire space. Workers had to move around crouching low to catch a breath of relatively clean air. The windows in the kitchen annexes were narrow and situated very high up near the roof.
They served as the only escape route for the accumulating combustion products.
On windless days, the gray haze hung thick in the air for days on end. The dense veil severely limited visibility, turning the familiar room into a labyrinth. The servants had to rely more on their hearing and memory than on their eyesight. Settling soot covered the walls, ceiling beams, and all furnishings with a thick layer. The black coating had to be scraped off regularly to prevent it from accidentally catching fire. This process required the erection of tall wooden scaffolding directly above the cooling furnaces. Cleaning the high vaults was considered one of the most difficult tasks in maintaining the fortress. The slightest carelessness at such heights led to a rapid fall onto the stone slabs. Drafts from open doors often changed the direction of air currents inside the building. A sudden gust of wind could send a cloud of soot crashing down onto tables laden with prepared food. Cooks had to use thick wooden lids to protect the cauldrons and bowls. Every open door disrupted the delicate temperature balance in the vast stone hall. Creating proper air circulation remained an unattainable dream in the early Middle Ages. It was only centuries later that engineers figured out to narrow the flues to create a strong artificial draft. Until then, the massive hoods above the hearths served merely as simple smoke collectors. Wide stone flues were often clogged with debris carried by the wind or fallen stones.
Cleaning such structures required lowering a person on a rope directly into a narrow shaft.
This task was considered incredibly difficult due to the pitch-black darkness and constant lack of oxygen. In winter, the ventilation problem was exacerbated by the need to conserve precious heat inside the building. Windows were closed with wooden shutters, blocking the last escape route for carbon monoxide. The air became incredibly stuffy, forcing people to go out into the frosty courtyard more often. The sudden temperature changes upon stepping outside severely exhausted the kitchen staff. A balance between heat retention and ventilation was never found. Every meal prepared had an invisible cost, expressed in hard labor. The massive stone vaults served as silent witnesses to this daily routine. The complex system of hearths required round-the-clock maintenance, with no days off or holidays. The castle's massive walls reliably shielded this dark and stuffy production facility from the outside world. The architectural features of the era made mundane tasks feel like a test of endurance. Daily survival in the kitchen block required special skills and incredible endurance. Such conditions forged a tough character and a habit of constant physical labor. Working amidst soot and smoke left an indelible mark on the lives of ordinary people. How did the castle's inhabitants cope with the consequences of such harsh working conditions without modern technology? The next chapter will reveal the secret of how an ordinary corridor turned into a fiery trap because of a single spark. What was found in old archives reveals the vulnerability of even stone fortresses to the elements. It is commonly believed that thick stone walls made a castle completely impervious to large-scale fires. However, interior ceilings, staircases, and partitions were, in most cases, made of dry wood. An abundance of tapestries, straw on the floor, and wooden furniture turned the halls into ideal fuel. A single unlit candle could cause the flames to spread rapidly across the floors. The fire spread at an incredible speed thanks to strong internal drafts. Long corridors and deep shafts acted like giant exhaust chimneys. The flames leapt rapidly from floor to floor, cutting off escape routes. Containing the fire within the enclosed space of a stone tower was a nearly impossible task. Defenders had to rely solely on limited water supplies from internal reservoirs. The wooden roof trusses were the most vulnerable part of the entire building structure. The mighty oak beams had dried out over decades to a powdery state.
If the flames reached the upper levels, saving the roof became absolutely impossible.
The heavy lead roofing sheets began to melt from the intense heat and drip downward. Drops of molten metal created an insurmountable barrier for people trying to extinguish the fire. Firefighting was carried out using leather buckets, passed hand to hand in a chain. This method required the participation of dozens of people and perfect coordination. Water splashed on the slippery steps, slowing down the rescue team's progress. Thick smoke in the narrow passageways made it impossible to breathe or find one's bearings. Often, the only solution was to shut the heavy oak doors tightly to cut off the oxygen supply. The danger lurked especially in the rooms of the nobility, where massive fireplaces burned around the clock. Expensive oriental rugs and thick bed canopies could easily catch fire from a stray ember. The heavy fabric quickly turned into a blazing tent, filling the room with acrid smoke. Saving valuable property took a back seat under such conditions. Few managed to find their way out of the tangled labyrinths of private chambers through the veil of smoke. To prevent disasters, strict rules regarding the handling of open flames were introduced. Special night watchmen regularly patrolled all the rooms, checking that the torches were securely fastened. Leaving burning candles unattended was strictly forbidden under threat of severe punishment. Large barrels of sand and water were installed in every wing of the building for emergencies. However, the human factor often nullified all these precautions. Fire remained an unpredictable neighbor for the inhabitants of massive citadels.
Life within a stone box created a false sense of absolute safety from any threats.
Everyday carelessness often led to consequences comparable to those of an enemy siege. Studying such aspects of daily life allows us to view history from a completely new angle. The best way to support the channel's growth is to like this video. What experts keep quiet about reveals the shocking truth about the conditions of guard duty. The harshest test for sentries was not an enemy assault, but the constant exposure to inclement weather. Watchtowers were built at the highest points to ensure maximum visibility of the surrounding area. These open platforms were buffeted by icy winds from all sides year-round. The lack of a roof overhead left the guards completely defenseless against torrential rain and snowfall. The confined space of the crenellated walls prevented the sentries from moving actively to stay warm. Long hours of motionless surveillance led to severe numbness in the limbs. Thick woolen clothing and fur cloaks offered relief only for a short time. The biting wind easily penetrated even the thickest layers of clothing, drawing precious warmth from the body. In the cold, the metal parts of the armor turned into veritable icy shackles. In the autumn months, thick fog shrouded the tall towers in a dense, damp veil. The dampness instantly soaked through the woolen cloaks, making them unbearably heavy and cold. Thick leather boots would get soaked and no longer retain heat. Standing in puddles on the stone floor caused the feet to freeze rapidly. Guard shifts had to be kept as short as possible to avoid irreversible health consequences for the sentries. The design of the embrasures featured narrow slits that created a wind tunnel effect. The wind howled through these openings, multiplying its chilling effect many times over. It was physically impossible to hide from these icy drafts in the open. Soldiers pressed their backs against the cold stones, trying to find at least some shelter from the elements. At night, the temperature at the top dropped significantly lower than in the enclosed inner courtyards. Moving through the icy galleries presented a separate and very serious problem. Snow and frozen rain turned the stone slabs into an incredibly slippery ice rink. Guards wrapped coarse cloth around their shoes to improve traction. Falling from the height of the fortress wall due to loss of balance was a frequent cause of tragedy. Every step on patrol required maximum concentration and caution. The conditions of service in the towers were considered among the harshest in the garrison. The command tried to provide the guards with hot food immediately upon their return to a warm room. A mug of hot broth became the main reward for several hours of standing in the biting wind. It took a long time to restore normal body temperature before the next shift. This exhausting cycle repeated day after day throughout the long winter. To protect their faces from icy sleet, the soldiers used thick woolen hoods. The narrow slits for the eyes severely limited peripheral vision while surveying the terrain. Snow clinging to their eyelashes and eyebrows forced them to constantly wipe their faces with a rough mitten. Gusts of wind often carried dust and fine sand, blinding the sentries. Keeping watch in such harsh weather conditions required incredible endurance. Even inside the guard quarters located one level below, the temperature rarely rose to a comfortable level. The stone walls, several meters thick, froze solid and constantly radiated cold. The narrow embrasures had no glass and let in damp, frosty air. Soldiers slept on wooden bunks, huddling close together to stay warm. The lack of proper rest took its toll on the overall vigilance of the entire military garrison. The massive walls could not protect their defenders from the merciless forces of nature. The garrison's survival depended directly on its ability to endure extreme weather conditions. The harsh climate became an invisible enemy, sapping the defenders' strength day after day. How difficult was it to maintain order in such low temperatures? The next chapter will describe how the dampness inside the stone halls became a real problem. The massive stone blocks used to build fortresses had the property of absorbing and retaining moisture. Foundations were often laid deep into damp soil or directly on the banks of rivers and moats. Capillary action caused water to slowly rise up the walls of living quarters. This constant dampness created a specific microclimate inside the castle, reminiscent of a deep cave. The air always remained heavy, cool, and incredibly humid, regardless of the season. Solid wood furniture quickly warped under the constant humidity. Oak tables and benches swelled, losing their original shape and strength. The iron hinges on the massive doors became covered in a thick layer of rust within a matter of months. Weapons and armor required daily cleaning and generous lubrication with animal fat to prevent corrosion. Keeping equipment in working order turned into a never-ending battle against rust. On the lower floors and in the cellars, moisture condensed directly on the cold walls. Tiny droplets of water constantly trickled down, forming small puddles on the uneven stone floor. Storing grain or flour in such conditions was practically impossible. Provisions quickly became moldy and completely spoiled without proper ventilation. The storerooms had to be moved to the upper, drier levels of the enormous building. To combat the dampness, the fireplaces in the main halls were kept burning even during the warm summer months. The constant fire helped dry the air slightly, but its heat was insufficient for such vast spaces. In the far corners of the spacious rooms, there were always areas of deep shadow and piercing cold. The stone absorbed all the heat generated, remaining indifferent to human efforts. Creating a cozy atmosphere under such conditions required an incredible amount of wood. Natural stone served as an excellent conductor, not only for moisture but also for sound. The echo of every step reverberated repeatedly off the vaulted ceilings and bare walls. The sound of rain outside echoed hollowly inside, creating a constant, oppressive background noise. Any loud conversation in the hallway could be heard through several closed doors. The lack of acoustic comfort added psychological strain to daily life. Small cracks in the masonry widened over time due to the freezing of accumulated water. In winter, the ice literally tore apart the lime mortar, weakening the overall structural integrity. Repair crews had to regularly inspect the facades and fill emerging cracks with fresh mortar. This work never stopped, as nature constantly tested the structure's resilience. Maintaining the castle in perfect condition required a continuous investment of effort and resources. Thick tapestries were hung on the walls not only for decoration, but also for insulation. The dense fabric created an air pocket that slightly slowed the penetration of cold into the room. However, the tapestries themselves quickly became damp and required regular airing in the sun. Carrying the heavy tapestries out into the courtyard turned into a major undertaking for dozens of servants. Caring for the textiles took up a significant portion of the staff's working hours. The battle against the invisible enemy of humidity shaped many aspects of daily life. The architectural grandeur of castles always went hand in hand with the physical discomfort of their inhabitants. The harsh microclimate required constant movement and housework to conserve heat. Every day brought new small tasks to maintain livable conditions. The romance of stone palaces paled in comparison to the reality of cold and damp corridors. A secret passed down from generation to generation concerns movement through the stronghold's internal passages. The appearance of spiral staircases became a real ordeal for every inhabitant of the high citadel. These narrow stone spirals wound steeply upward in a clockwise direction. The limited space made them incredibly difficult to navigate daily while carrying a load. The steps were triangular in shape, widening from the central pillar toward the outer wall. Carrying heavy objects up the winding shaft turned into an exhausting ordeal. Servants had to carry firewood, water, and baskets of food, constantly maneuvering around the central pillar. Massive trays caught on the uneven stone walls, threatening to slip from their hands. Carrying a load in pairs on the narrow staircase was physically impossible due to the lack of width in the passageway. The entire burden of logistics fell on the shoulders of individual porters, who had to climb hundreds of steps. Oncoming traffic on the spiral staircase created insurmountable problems. It was extremely difficult for two adults to pass each other in the narrow stone shaft. Someone had to press themselves tightly against the cold wall, yielding the way to the person carrying a load. The lack of windows in the shaft made it impossible to see who was coming down to meet you. Traffic jams often occurred, forcing people to return to the landing one floor below. The dim lighting made the stairwells even more unpredictable. Light from the rare embrasures illuminated only isolated sections of the stone spiral. Deep shadows distorted the perception of the distance to the next step, throwing one's stride off balance. At night, moving through the castle without a personal torch was considered the height of recklessness. A single misstep in the darkness led to a rapid tumble down the sharp edges of the stone. The absence of railings along the walls forced people to seek support directly on the smooth masonry. Servants ran their palms along the stones, leaving dark marks of grease and soot on them. In winter, the walls of the stairwells were covered with a thin crust of frost, turning icy. Grabbing hold of such a surface during a fall was simply impossible. The staircase's design left no room for errors in coordination or weakness in the legs. Many staircases were built without intermediate landings for rest between floors. The continuous ascent to a height of 30 meters made the heart race at an incredible speed. You could only stop to catch your breath by pressing your back against the curved wall. The narrow shaft created a chimney effect, drawing in cold drafts from the street. The ascent was accompanied by sharp gusts of wind that knocked the traveler off balance. The spiral design saved space but consumed a huge amount of energy. The architecture dictated its own strict rules of behavior within the fortress's multi-level space. How often did unforeseen incidents occur on these steep turns? The next chapter will describe how people moved in complete darkness without a single foothold. The design of interior passageways in castles was characterized by stark minimalism and pragmatism. Architects rarely considered installing railings along the sheer stairwells and galleries. Stone parapets were erected only on exterior walls to protect against enemy arrows. Inside the building, gaping openings led to deep lower halls without any protection. The familiar wooden or metal railings simply did not exist in early architecture. Wide ceremonial staircases leading to the main hall often ended abruptly in a void. The movement of a dense crowd during formal receptions created a massive crush at the edges of the steps. People standing at the edge could easily be pushed down by an accidental shove in the back. The absence of a side railing forced guests to instinctively huddle closer to the central wall. Balancing on the edge of the abyss was part of everyday etiquette and routine. Open galleries under the roof of the main hall connected the various wings of the enormous building. Walking along the narrow balcony, dozens of meters high, offered no safety net from the hall below. Servants ran along these ledges at incredible speed, delivering messages to their masters. Dizziness or a loss of balance at such a height left no chance of a safe outcome. A sense of vertigo constantly accompanied the inhabitants as they moved through the interior passageways. The problem was exacerbated by a catastrophic lack of artificial lighting in the long passageways. Windows were far from ubiquitous due to the need to preserve the structural integrity of the thick, load-bearing walls. Many corridors were plunged into absolute darkness, even on a bright, sunny summer day. Oil lamps were expensive and were lit only at the most important junctions. The residents covered most of the distance in complete visual darkness. Servants were given tallow candles, which smoked heavily and gave off a very dim yellow light. Drafts easily blew out the faint flame, leaving a person alone in the darkness. Relighting the wick without a special flint in a dark corridor was completely impossible. They had to slowly grope their way forward, sliding their hands along the uneven stone blocks of the walls. Memorizing the turns and steps became the main tool for safe movement. The uneven laying of the stone slabs on the floor created additional obstacles for the walker. The protruding edges of the blocks caused people to constantly stumble and lose their balance in the dim light. The absence of handrails made it impossible to grab onto anything during an accidental fall. The corridors often had sharp changes in elevation, consisting of 2 or 3 steps. These traps, invisible in the dark, were the cause of many everyday injuries. The sense of space in the vast halls was completely lost with the onset of thick twilight. The high vaulted ceilings dissolved into the darkness, leaving only a small illuminated spot by the fireplace. The journey from the hearth to the exit took quite some time and required extreme caution. Fresh straw scattered across the floor muffled the sound of footsteps, adding to the disorientation in the darkness. The inhabitants learned to move smoothly, feeling their way with their feet before each step. In the darkness, stone ledges and carved portal decorations turned into sharp corners. Colliding with such architectural elements caused no small amount of pain to the hurrying servants. Running through the corridors was strictly forbidden precisely because of the high risk of collisions in the darkness. The pace of life in the fortress depended directly on the time of day and the presence of sunlight. With the onset of night, life came to a standstill, giving way to silence and caution. Saving on lighting and security was dictated by the harsh realities of the medieval economy. Creating a comfortable living environment was not a priority in the design of citadels. Every step through the dark, railingless galleries was a test of agility and luck. Adapting to these conditions shaped a unique fluidity of movement in all the castle's inhabitants. The architecture fostered attentiveness to the surrounding space better than any strict rules. Providing food for the massive garrison required the creation of spacious storage areas within the walls. The castle's cellars were filled with enormous barrels of salted meat, wine, and heavy sacks of grain. Concentrating such immense weight on a limited floor area placed a colossal load on the structure. The wooden beams of the lower levels often sagged under the weight of multi-ton food supplies. Architects had to install additional support pillars to prevent sudden collapses. The grain was stored in bulk in deep wooden bins that took up entire rooms. Dry wheat was extremely heavy and exerted lateral pressure on the partitions. Sometimes the fragile wooden walls could not withstand the pressure and would crash down under the weight. Thousands of kilograms of grain would rush into the passageways, knocking workers standing there off their feet. Freeing oneself from under the avalanche of grain without outside help was an absolutely impossible task. Heavy barrels were hoisted from deep cellars using primitive hand winches. Hemp ropes quickly frayed against the stone edges of the hatches and the wooden shafts of the mechanisms. A broken rope caused the load to plummet back into the dark underground shaft. The massive barrel would shatter into pieces, destroying every obstacle in its path downward. Workers at the winch had to exercise extreme caution and constantly inspect the rigging. Rolling the barrels across the uneven basement floor required considerable physical effort and coordination. The stone slabs were often sloped to allow water to drain, which made controlling the load more difficult. The heavy container could easily slip out of their hands and roll off in an unpredictable direction. Servants had to use special wooden wedges to secure the barrels in place. A single misstep could trigger a domino effect in the cramped space. The upper tiers of the towers were also used to store light but bulky supplies. Dried fish, herbs, and wool occupied the spaces under the roof, creating a fire hazard. Hauling these goods up the narrow spiral staircases took a tremendous toll on the porters. Overloading the upper wooden floors often led to their gradual warping and sagging. The creaking of strained beams served as a constant background noise while working in the storerooms. Dampness in the cellars led to the rapid decay of wooden supports and load-bearing structures. Weakening of the warehouse's foundation could cause partial collapse of the vaults above it. Inspections of the cellars were conducted regularly, but hidden defects were not always detected. A sudden collapse of stones buried not only valuable supplies, but also people. Clearing the rubble in the cramped underground space took many months of painstaking manual labor. Stacking sacks of flour required strict adherence to the rules for balancing tall stacks. An improperly stacked pyramid of sacks could collapse from the slightest jolt or vibration of the walls. The fall of dozens of heavy bales created a thick cloud of flour dust in the unventilated room. It became impossible to breathe in such a cloud, and workers had to rush out of the storeroom. Flour dust, moreover, had the property of spontaneously combusting from the slightest accidental spark. Control over the distribution of food was carried out by special quartermasters with incredible strictness. Every movement of cargo was meticulously recorded to prevent theft and damage to valuable property. The hustle and bustle in the dark storerooms led to frequent trips over discarded tools or containers. The lack of windows forced the use of candles, increasing the risk of accidental fire among the sacks. Working in the warehouse was considered a responsible but extremely dangerous occupation for commoners. To protect against rodents, supplies were often raised onto high wooden platforms. Building such structures inside an existing room required the skill of carpenters and reliable materials. The suspended shelves sometimes broke under the weight of the hard cheese wheels stored on them. Falling products could cause serious injuries to the storekeepers passing below. Organizing safe storage in medieval conditions was a complex engineering challenge. Supplying the fortress was a vital process, hidden from the eyes of the noble lords. The deep cellars held not only wine, but also the constant threat of collapse. The physical labor of the porters ensured the garrison's survival during the long winter months. The architecture of the storage areas dictated strict rules for handling heavy loads of provisions. Every visit to the dark dungeons required caution and respect for the laws of physics. The castle's inner courtyard served as the main thoroughfare and a place of constant bustling activity. The paving of large cobblestones made the surface uneven and difficult for horse-drawn carts to navigate. In rainy weather, the gaps between the stones filled with liquid mud and horse manure. Walking on such a surface was slippery even on a dry, warm summer day. Servants had to constantly balance themselves as they carried heavy baskets across the wide open space of the courtyard. The heart of any inner courtyard was a deep well, which supplied the fortress with drinking water. The shafts were cut into solid rock to incredible depths, sometimes reaching hundreds of meters. The edges of the well were often framed by a low stone parapet that did not provide adequate protection against falling. Water had to be drawn by hand, turning a heavy wooden wheel with a long iron chain. The wet planks around the well remained incredibly slippery and treacherous for people. The enormous weight of the bucket of water required tremendous effort to lift it from the depths. Wet hands slipped on the smooth wood of the wheel, threatening to let go of the mechanism's handle. The wheel spinning at breakneck speed in the opposite direction posed a serious threat to the operator. Peering into the dark abyss of the shaft was strictly forbidden due to severe bouts of vertigo caused by the depth. Losing one's balance on the slippery edge led to a rapid fall into the icy black void. In winter, the water spilled around the well froze, turning the center of the courtyard into a solid sheet of ice. Chipping away at the ice became a daily, exhausting duty for the junior kitchen workers and stable hands. The approaches to the spring were sprinkled with ash and sand to provide at least some footing. Nevertheless, slips and hard landings on the frozen stone occurred regularly. Delivering water to the living quarters turned into a veritable expedition across ice floes. The courtyards also housed numerous outbuildings, smithies, and stables. The constant clanging of hammers and the neighing of horses created a ceaseless cacophony of sounds. Sparks from the anvil flew directly at people passing by, forcing them to quicken their pace. Horses were often startled by sudden noises and might unexpectedly bolt toward the crowd. Crossing the courtyard during peak activity required heightened awareness of the surroundings. Trash and slop were often dumped directly from the windows of the upper floors into special chutes. A strong gust of wind could easily splash the contents of the chute onto people passing below. Foul-smelling puddles accumulated in the depressions of the pavement, poisoning the air on hot summer days. Cleaning the courtyards of accumulated dirt was rare and required the mobilization of the entire garrison. Unsanitary conditions remained a constant companion of the grand stone architecture for many centuries. Rainwater was drained through a system of open stone channels at ground level. These shallow ditches crossed the courtyard in the most unexpected places, posing hidden obstacles. In the dark, stepping into such a gutter was a common and extremely unpleasant occurrence. During heavy downpours, water rushed through the channels in a torrential stream, spilling over the edges. The courtyard turned into a shallow lake, beneath whose waters lay the slippery cobblestones of the pavement. Often, the interior space was blocked off by temporary wooden scaffolding for ongoing facade repairs. Moving beneath these rickety structures carried the risk of falling tools or construction debris. Bricklayers dropped chunks of mortar and rock fragments directly onto the busy walkway. Warning shouts were not always audible due to the general noise of the bustling work in the courtyard. Residents got used to walking while constantly looking not only at their feet but also up. During sieges or training exercises, heavy siege weapons and wooden targets were rolled out into the courtyard. Huge siege engines took up almost all the open space, blocking the usual routes. Servants squeezed between the creaking wheels and taut ropes of trebuchets, carrying baskets of laundry. The harsh realities of military life constantly intruded upon the peaceful domestic life of the stone fortress. Safe zones within the defensive perimeter simply did not exist by the very nature of the architectural design. The open space of the courtyard deceptively seemed the safest place in the castle's tangled labyrinth. In reality, it harbored many hidden traps for the inattentive traveler. Life under the open sky within the ring of walls required just as much vigilance as in the dark corridors. Hard physical labor by the well and the bustle around the forges shaped the character of daily life. These unassuming details paint a complete picture of the real, rather than the fictional, Middle Ages. The castle's main hall is traditionally regarded as a symbol of luxury and comfort in historical novels. In reality, however, these vast rooms suffered from the same problems as the rest of the fortress. The high vaults prevented warm air from the fireplaces from lingering at human height. All the heat immediately rose upward, leaving the inhabitants shivering on the drafty stone floor. It was physically impossible to heat such a vast space even with the most powerful wood-burning fireplaces. The windows in the main halls were made large to provide sufficient lighting during feasts. Before the advent of affordable sheet glass, window openings were covered with thin bull bladders or oiled cloth. These materials let in a dim light but offered no protection whatsoever against the biting winter drafts. The wind swept freely beneath the high ceilings, swaying the heavy chandeliers and causing the candles to flicker. Banquet guests had to sit at the tables wrapped in warm fur capes. The floor of the hall was covered with a thick layer of straw or fragrant herbs to retain heat. Over time, this plant covering mixed with fallen food scraps and spilled drinks. Inside this bedding, an ideal environment was created for the rapid proliferation of various unpleasant odors. The straw was replaced only before the arrival of particularly important guests or on major holidays. Until then, the occupants had to put up with the distinctive aroma wafting through the air of the spacious room. The wooden tables consisted of massive planks laid on removable trestles. The instability of this design led to heavy tableware frequently tipping over during boisterous feasts. Falling wine goblets stained expensive garments and added dampness to the straw floor. The long benches had no backrests, making sitting on them for long periods an extremely tiring affair. Comfort, in the modern sense of the word, was absent even in the most privileged areas of the citadel. During formal receptions, the hall would fill with a huge crowd. The throng of guests and servants created an unimaginable crush in the aisles between the long wooden tables. The constant movement of dozens of people added chaos and unpredictability to the work of the servers carrying heavy dishes. Tripping over a bone or a cup tossed on the floor was a common occurrence. The hustle and bustle and the incredible crowding turned a beautiful celebration into hard and exhausting physical labor. The open fires in the hearths of the main hall required constant supervision by special stoker. Sparks from crackling logs easily flew onto the wooden tables and the hems of the guests' clothing. Smoldering embers had to be quickly stamped out to prevent a serious fire right in the middle of the feast. Smoke often shifted direction as the grand doors opened, filling the hall with acrid fumes. The revelers had to periodically close their eyes and clear their throats because of the thick sulfuric haze. The room's enormous size created specific acoustic effects during large gatherings. Loud conversations, music, and the clinking of dishes merged into a single deafening roar that pounded the ears. Hearing a conversation partner at the opposite end of the table was practically impossible without shouting. Sharp sounds bounced off the stone walls, amplified many times over by the high-pointed arches. Prolonged exposure to such noise caused severe headaches for most of those present. Musicians were stationed on the upper interior balconies, entertaining the guests with their playing. The narrow, unrailed galleries posed a serious danger to performers who had had one too many ales. Falling from such a height directly onto the set tables was a very real possibility. One had to climb up to these balconies via rickety wooden ladders in complete darkness. A creative profession in the Middle Ages required not only talent, but also basic coordination skills. Cleaning the hall after a grand celebration took several days of grueling manual labor. Dirty straw was gathered with wooden pitchforks and carried out in huge baskets to the castle's inner courtyard. Stone slabs were washed with cold water mixed with sand to remove grease that had seeped into the pores. The smell of sour wine wafted out through the wide-open doors during the long, cool hours. Restoring the room to a livable state was a task for an entire army of cleaners. The staterooms were the face of the castle, but behind their splendor lay the same fundamental problems. Cold, drafts, poor acoustics, and the constant threat of fire accompanied every lavish event. Luxury coexisted with basic domestic inconveniences. Taken for granted by all strata of society, the austere architecture left its mark on every minute of life within the thick walls. The true story lies precisely in these hidden details of the harsh daily existence. Exploring the hidden side of ancient architecture allows us to understand the true cost of survival in those harsh times. Stone walls protected against external enemies, but they themselves became a serious ordeal for their inhabitants. Please suggest new topics for future historical videos in the comments and subscribe to the channel.